This is from after David Cartledge said on last week's Mailbag that the 2020s have been his least favourite decade of football. Why do you think that, even though we're probably in the highest scoring period ever, this is the growing sentiment? Could it just be nostalgia talking? And David gave a very good argument that the noughties were his favourite football.
Yeah, but he comes on our football show, talks about our football shit now, and we lose all the listeners. He's gone again to ESPN next week.
I mean,
it's disrespectful.
We won the award just after he appeared.
I can think of a couple of reasons why David is annoyed, to be fair. One, Sunderland fan.
That's that.
Two, getting older, so more cantankerous.
Man United fan as well.
Yeah. Three, short king. So he gets short people are famously angry.
How dare you? Famously angry.
He's not short, especially not by Ramble standards.
Is he not short? Maybe I'm misremembering that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I've only ever seen him sitting down.
Well, look, I think you've got...
And he didn't even stand up to greet me, and I felt disrespected.
I mean, we should make it absolutely clear that David Cartledge isn't here today to defend himself or his point.
Danny DeVito's always
let's pile into him more.
Danny DeVito's always quite jolly, isn't he?
Yeah.
You just put David on the same page as Danny DeVito.
No, you just said David wasn't short. I was thinking of other short kings.
Okay.
How short is Danny DeVito?
Very short. Yeah.
He's apparently 1.47 metres.
I think you're going to about 1 foot 4 inches, and I was like, blimey.
That means he's 4'8". That can't be right.
He is.
Wow, that's unreal. Yeah. Anyway, carry on. I'm derailing it.
Amazing when he went toe-to-toe with Arnie that time.
Yeah.
So anyway, the 2020s...
David said the noughties, didn't he, on the show was his favourite?
I said 90s, and I did show my working. There was a little bit of nostalgia there, whereas I don't think there was with David with the noughties, and I was quite compelled with his argument, to be honest. But the 2020s, yes, his least favourite decade, and as Moon says, growing sentiment. Why, Luke Moore, do you think this could be the case?
There's a number of reasons I can think of.
Yes.
Possibly now because we have so much access to information that we know all the bad shit as well. And I think when we were younger and back in the day, you talk about the 90s there, we're a lot more naive about things.
It's an area of mystery.
Is that where you think the nostalgia point that Moon's making comes into?
Kind of, but I also feel quite strongly that I've always been really into football. I've always, wanted to learn as much about it as I can, wanted to watch it. And I don't think that even me in my nerdiest phase, when I was 19 or whatever, could name all the chairmen of all the Premier League clubs or the off-air affairs of the finances of a particular thing. It wasn't a conversation as much then. So
you wouldn't have been into it, though, as your younger self.
We're exposed to a lot more information, is what I'm saying. So that could be one possible reason. Second thing is, and perhaps this is a more compelling reason, is that there's too much football.
Right.
So there's a bit of ennui about it, and people are kind of like, oh, fucking football again. Doesn't feel like a crescenting, to use Moon.
Back to Moon.
Yeah, and a kind of, there's not a waning and a waxing.
It's not a treat, is it?
Enjoying the game.
I mean, I love marzipan. I wouldn't want it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
But breakfast and lunch is fine. But when
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
This actually happened when I did the radio show on TalkSport. That was actually when we crossed from the teens into the noughties, the 20s, if you like.
Yeah.
And it did feel noticeable, and I said this at the time, people can go back and check. For a while on that show, I felt like I was doing build up to a game, game, reaction to a game, and it was a cycle. As we moved through into the 20s, it actually started to feel like game, and there was no real let up. And I think for a lot of people and their mentality, it can be like, I don't want any more of this. It's too much. So I find the whole thing a bit boring. And then you throw into the mix that most of our listeners are Premier League fans, and most of the stuff we talk about is Premier League. Well, the last 6 seasons, in fact, last 6 seasons, Man City won 5 of them, right? And it's not been particularly close, really.
So this would be my point, I think.
And I think so people get bored of that. And then you also factor into the idea that the vast majority of the clubs that people support in this country are never going to win really anything. And it's been it's less likely now than it's ever been they're going to win something. And it put all that into the mix, and it's got people like, well, I might just do something else.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. For me, when Moon says, even though we're in probably the highest scoring period ever, obviously goals are the best bit of football, so you like that, but a lot of those goals are scored by the elite clubs. And the fact is we have the term elite club now. It does feel like a bit of a closed shop. The Super League would have been the absolute peak of that, of course, but that didn't happen. But again, you have a certain type of club. I mean, in the 2020s, I think we said this point a while ago, and I used the example of Gabriel Batistuta. You don't get a striker of his immense quality at a club a similar size to Fiorentina, or a club that would have been Harry Kane at Spurs. Actually, to be fair, would have been maybe, there's an argument there, because Fiorentina were a Champions League club back in the day, or certainly got into the Champions League. But any player who shows any kind of form or shows anything is immediately snapped up by the big clubs. And
you think Jack Grealish is an example of
Jack
that?
Grealish is an example, yeah. And your best bet is to get them back on loan or something if it hasn't quite worked out. So there's that point about the elite clubs cleaning up. And I made the point last week about how it used to be the case up until the 2010s that you would average a treble once a decade. Celtic, I think it was Ajax in the 70s, PSV, Man United, Barcelona. Inter straight after Barcelona, and then suddenly Barcelona got another one, and Bayern Munich are there, and
Bayern have done it twice,
and all that kind of stuff. So that again, that shows you that. But another point I thought about this is the types of players that we loved when we were growing up. You think about some of the names. You think about a Roberto Baggio type player. Where does he fit into modern football? Modern football now, a lot of it in the 2020s more specifically, because of what Guardiola and others have brought in with that very much. Obviously, I know he's standing on the shoulders of giants, but the pressing, the running, the engines.
Very system-based football.
Yes, and that requires nowadays incredibly fit players with the demanding schedules, and players now who are getting signed a lot younger, because we said, players used to peak in their late 20s. Now you can't wait that long. It's like, we need you, Mr. 21-year-old who's got incredible lungs on you and stuff. We need you in the heart of the midfield now. So those kind of more mercurial, now they would be seen. I don't know if they'd be seen luxury players anymore. I think by and large they might have fallen by the wayside.
I mean, in fairness, that's what Ancelotti thought about Baggio like 25 years ago.
Yeah,
and has regretted it ever since.
Yeah, but and so I think that with football, there seems to be kind of one way of playing it. And again, that is massive kudos to Guardiola, really, who's the one that kind of popularised it and took it to that nth degree, of course. But I think the style of football, as I say, you seem to get those fewer mercurial talents who take risks with the ball and do all sorts. You'll always have players that are skillful, that are Kevin De Bruyne, or you don't need to name them, Salah and so on. But you know what I mean?
You think Messi is the greatest player of his time, and he is the ultimate talented individual who's completely at the service of the collective. He doesn't do everything he can, but he does what suits the team. Yeah, no,
obviously won the World Cup in 2022.
Yes,
but is a declining force come the 2020s. If you like, I'm not saying he wouldn't have made a fist of it.
But we have to. But
do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I totally understand what you're saying of how the football's changed and how it's played is different, and how the profile of player that modern football needs is different. I get all that. We have to also add further context though, and say, Moon's asked a question. He's called it a growing sentiment, I guess, among the people on the Discord that listen to the Ramble. People he knows, and the people who listen to our show are a very particular type of football fan, and we're very proud of that. They're a lot more thoughtful and a lot more kind of educated, I think. Obviously, I would say that, but I don't think we get morons listening as a general rule. Mm-hmm. And but
they do watch our clips on Instagram, though.
Those ones are fine to do. Yeah. But my point being that the wider milieu around football watching, both here and in the US, is, according to NBC, according to Peacock, who stream it in the US, according to Sky Sports here, the audience has never really been higher. So people, and there's different reasons for that. And of course, we'd all like to be our own critics. We'd like to be able to announce our own viewing figures and all the rest of it. But there's more access, of course, as well. But the numbers that say Sky Sports reported on the opening day or the opening weekend of last season was something like 40% up on the season before. Right. So if there is a growing feeling, it's not broadly shared by the viewing figures.
No, but I guess it's not shared by a different audience, perhaps. Well, you could argue. Maybe. I mean, I think what is clear at the moment is that football is in the process of moving from sport to entertainment.
Yeah, totally.
That is the clearest thing. But I wouldn't disagree with
Andy, can I just say, really interestingly enough, I wrote in my notes for this episode, football is moving from being more and more part of the entertainment industry rather than the sporting industry. That's my notes as well. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, well, look, I don't disagree with anything that any of you guys have said. All I would do is drill down a little bit more into the question, because a lot of what you've talked about, I think, has been what has happened to football in the last decade. Whereas I think what Moon's specifically talking about, or what he specifically asked at least, is about the 2020s, which is a shorter period, which is a more recent period. The obvious thing straight away, and I think scheduling feeds into this, is COVID.
Right.
Because I think the sensation that when I can't remember a time in my football watching, supporting or covering life where I've had to refer more to, you know me, whenever we do these shows, I don't take notes. I'm not a note taker. Now, perhaps as my brain turns to mush over the years, that will change. But and I'm still not a note taker, but I can't think of a period more than in the last 2 years where I've recalled a moment and I've had to go back and check what season it is. Because separating the seasons since 2020 has become increasingly difficult, because when football took a decision, it had a pivotal point in 2020 when COVID hit to say, okay, if we're getting to a point where a world health emergency is making us postpone football and we're panicking about how we're going to fit into those games, is completely the wrong way to look at it. Of course, the way that it should have been looked at, and you think of games like the Liverpool Atletico game, which definitely shouldn't have happened in the Champions League, for example. There was still that sense of football is the most important thing beyond world public health, and we've got to find a way to make this happen, because when else are we going to fit this in? If that is the way you are thinking about things, there is too much football. And of course, the fact that football in most countries, of course the exceptions being France and the Netherlands in Europe, and they paid a financial penalty for that. In the case of France, they're still paying that financial penalty. We've just got to get the show back on the road any which way. And rather than thinking, how are we going to change things so it's more palatable and we can operate more in the real world? Football has doubled down and created its own mini world where it's like, right, we're going to put exactly the same amount of football in a shorter amount of time. And then you've got that. You've got the Winter World Cup in 2022. Now, as kind of hints at, that was actually a very enjoyable World Cup for reasons that we discussed.
I think international football's been good in the 2020s, actually, in more recent years.
But funnily enough, we talk about it all the time with the Nations League, don't we? The Nations League came out of the blocks brilliantly. I think it was a great addition to international football and a great addition to football, but it's been demonised because it was the last one in. Whereas it's not really the problem. If you look at the amount of football there is, you would have a lot of people out there go, let's just cut out the Nations League, rather than thinking club football has had a problem for a really long time. And I think in terms of us, going back to Luke's point about, being able to savour it and enjoy it, why do we even do this? Because as a football supporting community, we love to savour the moments. That's what analysis is, actually. Certainly the way we do it as the Football Ramble, it's about savouring the moments. It's about enjoying the moments. If there's so much of it, and you're often in the case when you're, even when you're preparing a show, is it a review? Is it a preview? Well, it's got to be both because there's so much football. You don't really get that opportunity to savour it. And I think that's a huge problem. And you need that sense of, we were talking on the Friday Ramble yesterday about the Spurs game and about the Fulham game. But it felt like, why have we got Premier League football on a Thursday night? We've just got a Thursday off from European football. The Thursday used to be, a sacred night, away from football. Yeah. And that sense
ever since the Cup Winners' Cup went, it was like, Thursdays are free now.
Exactly. You need that sense, I think, to really savour football, to really breathe it in. of having a life outside it.
Yeah, I watch it a lot and I like it, and I can't watch all of it.
Well, I was going to say, it's also disrespectful to the Europa Conference League, what you just said there, Andy.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find that if your team does play on a Thursday night on the telly and they win, it's pretty damn good.
It's fine, actually.
But yes,
And you get to watch an action film on Channel 5 afterwards.
So maybe it's just...
that doesn't even happen anymore,
Maybe it's
does
just
it?
there's just too much of it, right?
too much of it. Could be an element of nostalgia talking as well, but
And David being old and cantankerous. Don't forget that.
I
would never forget that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's have a quick breather and we'll answer more of your questions in a moment. Andy has the next question.
I do. It's from Gary on Instagram. After it was reported this week that the 3 p.m. blackout will likely be scrapped by the end of the decade, do you guys think it's about time that we let 3 p.m. games be screened across the nation?
No, because we already watch too much football.
And no, that football is already happening. It's just whether you can watch it or not.
Oh, I see.
This is a really interesting question. Obviously, it's been reported that it's in line to be lifted, as Gary's question says. All the news outlets have run with that story this week. The UK is the only country in Europe that still has it, I think. But in Europe, of course, there aren't as many countries with a huge lower league system like ours, if any.
And also, a lot of them don't kick off at the same time on Saturday.
So I would. So the FA are the ones that enforce this, I think, and they're the ones that have kind of held the line on it for so long, and obviously under increasing pressure from all the usual stakeholders. I spoke to someone at the FA about this yesterday, and yeah, they were very sceptical about whether the FA could continue to hold the line under such pressure, and will try and probably exert or kind of extract some other concessions out of it, but we probably won't be able to hold it for much longer.
So where do you think the pressure is really coming from? Is it coming from the clubs, the networks, or from the consumers who are paying a lot for football and not getting anywhere near all of it?
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit of all those things.
We've seen it from the club, certainly. I mean, Klopp used to get annoyed when Liverpool play at 12:30, for example, on the Saturday, the earlier kickoff, if they've had...
He didn't like to mention that. He's very quietly got annoyed about it.
But I mean, it's the reason why 12:30 and 5:30 kickoffs exist on a Saturday in England, because of that blackout. I mean, it wouldn't... You remember back in the day, you used to have 11 o'clock kickoffs.
Yeah, you did.
It seems crazy, but that's...
So I would... So I flipped around on this. I suppose I'm choosing to interpret the question as, is it a good thing or a bad thing? I suppose, is it about time it was scrapped? I mean,
that's what it's asking.
Yeah. So yeah. I feel like it's probably on balance, and I'm not massively strident either way on this. Weirdly, because I can see both sides of it. Mm-hmm. I do think that it's a little bit anachronistic, and I do understand people who are sympathetic to the idea that, really. We're paying all this money. We're consumers, as Marcus has mentioned. We deserve this. But I do think there's an element of this, and the reason I'm going to come down on the side of the fact that I think it should stay is because I think there's an element here where we do have to become better, not just as a sport, but as a society, at understanding what the actual value of things is, rather than just the price of everything all the time. And it happens in so many parts of our modern life that people never take a second to think about the value they're getting for something they're paying for, or the value of something that is beyond monetary price anyway. And the tradition of the 3 p.m. blackout really does protect, particularly League Two downwards, not just the clubs financially, but the cultural impact of them, the social element of it, the things that Michael Cox said in his piece in The Athletic a while back, maybe about a year ago, about how it will genuinely very badly affect lower league and non-league teams. This is not about you can't get a ticket for Liverpool versus Everton, whatever it be, at 3 p.m. I know they're not playing at 3 p.m. today, but generally, so you should be able to watch it on TV. No one is suggesting that Newcastle or Man United or whoever, Spurs, aren't going to be able to sell their stadium out because the game's on TV at 3 p.m. What they are suggesting is this 3 p.m. blackout protects the people that would otherwise go to non-league games. Now, I've got personal experience with this because I go and see Gosport Borough, right? It was my local non-league team when I'm back down south. Their attendance fluctuates massively depending on whether Portsmouth are at home or not, right? And the example Michael Cox used in his article that he wrote was that there's a team up in North London, I forget who it is. he was making the point that they'll have X amount of people come down in the hundreds or whatever, which is massively important.
Was it?
No, I don't think it was Barnet. I think it was someone lower down than that.
Okay.
But he said if you speak to every single person in that game, they'll tell you they're either a Spurs or an Arsenal fan.
Yes, that's right.
If they can sit at home and watch Spurs or Arsenal on TV at 3 p.m, they're not going to go to the game. And if they're not going to go to the game, these teams will find it very, very hard to survive. So sometimes I think we have to look at the situation in a far broader context and say, what are we doing to protect this amazing cultural phenomenon that isn't just the Premier League, which of course is an incredibly successful, well-marketed export to the world, but this league system and this non-league system where you can actually go to a 6th, 7th, 8th tier team and there's an atmosphere there and people care about it. At Gosport Borough, I think the highest they've been that I can think of is Conference South. They're not Conference South now. I think they're Premier, whatever it is now, the equivalent of Ryman Premier or something. Sometimes you get over 1,000 people there. That's amazing.
That is, yeah.
Right, and they play their games. I mean, Peckham Town's another example where I live. They play their games at 2:30. If on a Saturday, if people could watch Premier League games at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, bearing in mind the build-up for the show would start at 2 o'clock, no one's going to go. Yeah, I mean, you have to understand that.
I don't know. As a supporter of a League Two team, I think there are two elements to this. One, we're talking about people's right to choose what they want to do with their spare time, which I think is quite important. But secondly, I don't know, it appears to me increasingly like we're drifting into the Florentino Perez arena of saying how young people absorb football. The fact is, my children, for example, know there is a massive difference between watching football on the television and going to actually see a game. And regardless of the levels, they would 100% rather go to the game than sit at home and watch it on television. Now, I think
because our old man's got about 6 screens going every fucking Saturday.
Yeah,
we want to.
I mean, the crucial
we want to
question
escape being Alec Baldwin in.
The crucial question for them is not do you want to stay at home and go to the game? It's where's Dad watching what football next? You know, okay, we'll go to the game then.
I think.
Do you have any sympathy with the argument I've just made?
I do have some sympathy with it, but I think it's a little bit antiquated as well. I think it's a little bit of a thing for League One and League Two clubs to hide behind, and to a lesser extent National League clubs as well to hide behind. Make it cheaper, make it a more attractive product, make it something that people feel part of. Don't assume that you have a right to be propped up.
I don't think that's fair when you talk about non-league teams. Well, I think I go to non-league football a lot, right? I probably will end up going to between 15 and 20 non-league games this season across a couple of different non-league clubs. They do a lot, and a lot of it is run by volunteers. A lot of it is almost expressly designed.
I'm well aware of that. I've seen my club play at all those levels.
So what I'm saying, but I know you have, but it's different for AFC Wimbledon. They were always having a massive community around them. The whole thing was a community project. Yeah, I don't think that's relevant. With respect, I don't think that's relevant to a Peckham Town, to a Gosport Borough. The fact of the matter is that attendances for non-league teams massively fluctuate depending on what the other options are. And your kids may know what they know, and I've got no doubt about that.
No, but their friends are the same.
But you give a 10-year-old the chance to watch, whoever his favourite player is in the Premier League on telly at 3 o'clock, or do you want to traipse down with your old man down the rain to watch players you've never heard of? Sometimes they're going to choose the latter. A lot of the time they're going to choose the former.
I think far less than you think.
This ain't difficult stuff.
Far less than you think.
And what about the fluctuation between the Gosport Borough attendance when Portsmouth at home and when they're not?
Yeah, sure, but that's not a TV thing, is it? You're talking about them competing with a big League One club. And, you've had that situation. There are ways around that.
I was waiting for Luke to correct you there.
Last season and next season, to be fair.
There are ways around that. And really, you just have to be smart. You look at how Tranmere always used to play on Friday nights, for example, to avoid Liverpool and Everton.
But that's not in their own hands, is it?
I wouldn't use that as a particularly good example.
That's not in their own hands, though. They can't choose to do that.
I mean, you can't be...
Not these days.
You can't, look, for me, I think Luke's argument is the most persuasive.
Yes!
For me,
it's probably because I haven't had a chance to speak yet.
I haven't had a chance to finish my sentence.
No one wants to hear you two.
Which you might be surprised to know. has just suddenly changed. But no, I think Luke's is the most persuasive argument to keep the 3 p.m. blackout. I mean, I have sympathy for both. I mean, it is almost like, if I'm going to sound a bit like a politician, you're trying to kind of just hold back the rampant free market economy or free or sort of neoliberal.
I don't think there's any chance you're going to stop it.
No, indeed. But that's kind of what you're doing. And the football pyramid really is sacred in this country. Let's be honest. You have to preserve it, and you have to give teams the best of chances. So the thought of if it was concluded after this blackout, and once the horse has already bolted, it's gone. If it was to be to the detriment of lower league clubs, I think that would be an incredibly sad and quite frankly disastrous thing.
True, but I don't think it needs to be.
However, from a Premier League point of view, I think that actually, if you were to say to fans travelling, you don't have to travel to a game at 12:30 or 5:30 on a Saturday, and perhaps there will be more on a Saturday and maybe not so many on the Sunday, then I think fans would actually quite like that in the Premier League, and I think the clubs would as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make, that we've not really talked about match-going Premier League fans yet.
No,
because I have a friend who's a Middlesbrough supporter who, like, probably about 10, 15 years ago now, so a while ago now, when they were a Premier League fixture, said he'd stopped renewing his season ticket because he travelled from about an hour away, didn't live in Middlesbrough anymore, to go to the games. And he said they'd played 3 p.m. Saturday kickoff before January.
Yeah, that's right.
And that
can happen a lot.
And it just kills your weekend.
And I do love the idea of all the games on a 3 p.m. or a lot of the games on 3 p.m. But I would say that the idea, and again, this is more of a Premier League argument, I do understand, but I think the idea that fans would rather stay at home and watch the game than go to the game. I just, Fulham played on Thursday night. I couldn't go to the match, but I did watch it at home. All of me was just like, I'd much rather be there.
Yeah, sure.
And it's but the
generation. Sorry to cut in, but the generation that we all are aren't as addicted to screens and seeing them as a part of reality the same way we see them as separate.
Fine.
I don't think it's the same thing. And I also,
but if you go to the game, you can do more for the gram, can't you?
Let me put a compromise.
Absolutely.
Let me put a little compromise in here then for us to talk about, because reality about the idea that X amount of Premier League games will no longer be played on the Monday night, which is inconvenient for fans, or a Sunday afternoon or whatever. That's just not going to happen. So put that out of your mind now, because the whole point of Sky Sports selling subscriptions is to get people to watch Sky Sports. There's no chance on earth they're going to put all of them on at the same time on a Saturday. But maybe the solution to this is to say, if you want to do this, the 3 p.m. blackout's actually a red herring. Get rid of the blackout if you want, but actually make the default kickoff time for the Premier League like 1 p.m. So people watch a 1 p.m. game on telly if they want. It's there for you. Premier League fans, for the reasons perhaps Marcus has just said, are always going to want to go to watch their club anyway. And then because it's your local non-league team or your local lower league team, invariably that's what it is. There's not many people travelling 500 miles to watch a team in League Two. It's just not happening. It's not how it happens. The away fans thing aside, it's a very much smaller number than the home fans. The compromise may well be that you say you can watch a Premier League game at 1 and then,
Well, you'd have to change kickoff times to 4, because unless you live 5 minutes up the road.
Well, whatever it is, 12:30, whatever.
Yeah.
Give people a chance. The reason I didn't say 5 is because people aren't going to get home until whatever. Pick your poison.
Yeah,
the point is the 3 p.m. has to change.
I think
for it to work.
It's an interesting point. I think as well, though, we can't duck the fact that the problems that a lot of League One and League Two clubs have is that they're all financially unsustainable. And
the model's fucked.
And that is a problem that needs to be addressed. Moving this would force them to start to address that.
Ooh.
And it's overdue.
Well, look, let's do a call to arms here and say, look, please email us,
from people,
tweet us, X us,
Blue Sky
us, Discord us.
Yeah.
Carrier pigeon us if you have to. Let us know your thoughts about the 3 p.m. blackout, because it is something that divides opinion greatly and intrigues opinion.
We'd love to hear from people. And we talk about this a bit more next week, maybe.
Absolutely. All right, I think it's time for a break. Luke Moore.
All right, let's bang through a few more because you two haven't shut up and we haven't got through these as quickly as I would have personally liked us to.
No, that's a fair comment.
What about this from Danny on Instagram? Which Premier League newcomer has impressed you the most this season? And I think for the purpose of Danny's question, we should focus on players only. Otherwise, you're going to talk about Enzo Maresca forever.
Or Arne Slot would be the easy answer.
Yeah, so players only. Which Premier League newcomer has impressed you the most?
Andy.
Well, I think Bournemouth straight away. You look at Milos Kerkez, Evan Nielsen.
Kirkus, goal of the season for me so far, baby.
Both very, very good. I still think Bournemouth have overplayed for Evan Nielsen, but he's done very well so far, and they won't regret spending that money if he keeps on the way he's going. The other one I'd like to underline while we're on centre forwards, Jurgen Strand-Larsen, because having scored a lot of goals for a not particularly good team last season, he's scoring at a decent lick for a not particularly good team this season. Yeah. Which is super difficult. The whole profile of him, obviously, is very suited to the Premier League, but it's not just been about the goals with him. I think you can see something really happening with him and Cunha.
You can, and if we're talking about strikers, then could I have Liam Delap? I mean,
so Ipswich have got a couple of candidates, Delap and Amari Hutchinson. I mean, he's played one Premier League game for Chelsea. He's not technically a newcomer, but I think we'll let you have either of those.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah,
all right, okay. Well, I mean, Liam Delap. There are even one or two people who are suggesting that long term, could he be the man to lead the line for England?
Oh, here we fucking go.
What's that?
Just leave it as it is. It's Premier League newcomer.
Yeah, but
not potential international newcomer in the future.
But that shows you
how highly you regard him.
That shows you what people are talking about. But okay, fine.
He says one or two people. He means one person. He means himself.
I own a mirror. The other one I would like to say is Nikola Milinkovic.
Oh, yeah.
Or Milinkovic, sorry, for Nottingham Forest at the back.
I cannot believe they got him still. What a good player he is.
Well, indeed. I think he's been very, very good. And Forest have obviously had, I know they've had a couple of sort of heavy-ish defeats recently, but they were to Arsenal and Man City, and
it's just gravity, isn't it?
I know Man City have not been themselves this season, but still. But Forest have had, they've been very good this season. Yeah. I don't think anybody would deny that. And I think he's been very good. And coming into the Premier League for the first time, playing in a very different league before that, different style and so on, has taken to it. And a mate of mine says he's one of those defenders who makes very few tackles because his positionally is so good. Clean shorts and all that kind of stuff, and reads the game well and so on. But also, Murillo is a defender that people have highlighted.
Oh, he's a legend at Forest already. People love him.
Indeed, but people are saying one of the big reasons why he's a legend at Forest is because of Milinkovic playing next to him and making him look good. Mate of mine even...
They're very complimentary, aren't they?
Well, he said it was almost like he's the Carvalho to the Murillo, John Terry kind of role, if you see what I mean. Allows him to do that.
That's high praise.
Well, this is a friend of mine who's a Forest fan, obviously, but we were talking... This was actually might have been even a month or two ago, but was saying how good he's been. So I think it's good to remember the defenders sometimes.
No, absolutely. I couldn't think of really that many. Evan Nielsen popped into my mind because he's got a few eye-catching goals. Is there any shout for Ricardo Calafiore? Or has he kind of been...
got an eye-catching goal himself.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, big impact against City, yeah.
Bit stop-start, though, isn't
he? I think with the injury, yeah. I think we move on, though, to this one from Johnny on Instagram, who said, what's the craziest way you've celebrated a victory? And what's the worst way you've taken a defeat?
Nice. Well, this reminded me of a story that someone told me. I can't quite remember who it was. I don't think it was any of you guys. But someone told me that when they were watching the 2005 Champions League final, where Liverpool came back and won against Milan, as we all know. They were watching it in a flat in a converted house with a bunch of Liverpool fans. And this guy told me so he was a Liverpool fan. And he said that they all celebrated so hard that the floor collapsed.
That's not true.
That's what they said. I wasn't there. That's what they said.
Right.
So I can't rival that. What I can tell you is I remember in 2002... I was going and watch Pompey away quite a bit as well back then, and I went to Selhurst Park to watch him play against Crystal Palace, and Crystal Palace went 2-0 up, and then Pompey got a goal back to make it 2-1, and then Jason Crowe came on, and he had spent some time on loan at Palace, and he was getting absolute dog's abuse, right? He was every time he touched the ball, and it was one of those ridiculous things that the fans never forget. Like he spent I think maybe 2 months on loan there. Never really did much. Played a handful of games. I think he might have turned down playing for them to come and sign for Portsmouth instead. So they were pissed off with him, right? And those of you listening, and I'm sure there's many of you who don't really know who Jason Crowe is, he was a right back. He scored 2 goals. I think it's the only. I think there might be the only 2 goals he scored in the same game in his whole career.
It's like Thuram against Croatia.
Yeah, basically like that. But far more illustrious, Andy.
Obviously.
Yeah. And Pompey won 3-2. And me and my mate straight away were like, we ain't going back to Portsmouth tonight. We're staying in London. We're getting the train the other way into London. And we stayed there all night. And I remember sleeping on the floor of Victoria Station when you could do that back then. They didn't sort of shepherd you on. We all got our heads down outside the WH
It's always been a hard floor, though.
It has. It was a hard floor, trust me.
Yep.
But slept outside the WH Smith in Victoria Station and got the first train back.
Where did you? Do you remember where you went?
We went to loads of different bars. Loads of bars.
Few fast food joints.
Ended up in the King's College Student Union.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, what a view of the river.
Yeah, because I think that was just after we'd graduated from Farmer the first time, so I was
yeah.
still probably still have a student card or something.
Blimey.
But that's probably the best way I've celebrated. The worst way I've taken a defeat, I'm a fucking Portsmouth and England fan. How long have you got? Yeah.
No, but as in like any particular... Because after the Euro 96 loss, when Germany beat England, I flipped over a few BMWs.
Yeah, yeah. On your own.
Oh, absolutely. One-handed.
The most upset I've been, that I can think off the top of my head, was when England lost to penalties to West Germany in 1990.
Yes.
I was only 9 though, but I was properly upset. I thought England were going to win it. And I was also pretty upset in 2018 because we'd come from no expectation at all to actually convincing ourselves across the period of a few weeks that we could actually do something. It was such a strange, unfamiliar feeling.
Yeah.
And then for it to collapse the way it did in quite a disappointing way, I was pretty upset about that.
Yeah.
I remember walking back through, again, Victoria Station, seeing everyone with the old St George's flags and beers in their hands, crying into their pints, thinking, God, that's shit, innit? That is shit.
I don't know what you mean. I suppose the craziest way I've celebrated, it's not that crazy, but I was in Kingston upon Thames town centre in 2000 for when England beat Germany 1-0, Alan Shearer header in Euro 2000. And it was funny. We were out. 2 of our geography teachers came out with us that night, and they were good about it. It was dead, like it was a big night out. It was.
Why have you got 2 geography teachers?
Good question.
Yeah.
One for human, one for physical.
Must have been. Andy. It must have been.
Hope it wasn't too physical.
But they were good. It was good. It wasn't like some sort of tragic situation. They were good value. We had a brilliant night, and that was the night. I think I told you this when there was obviously a DJ in the bar, and Germany are piling forward at the end of the game, and it's like, and I hadn't seen it or heard anything like this before. You probably get it to a penny now, but they were going forward, and some I don't know, whoever it was, lines are shot up, and you're like, and your heart's in your mouth, and it goes over the bar, and all you heard was like the old the DJ was playing that, and it just
Jackson's encyclopedia.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he totally took the pressure out of it. Every time they came forward, it's absolutely brilliant. But anyway, a friend of mine had an old Fiat Panda, which, believe me, was a convertible, right? I know that sounds mad, the old Fiat Panda. Google it. If you don't know what a Fiat Panda is, Google it. You'll think, how on earth? So you could properly take it down. And we were blasting out the tunes and stood up the whole way back home from Kingston to where we lived, which was probably about a 25-30 minute drive, just celebrating all the rest of it. If you think about that, that's incredibly dangerous, Andy.
It is. Very much so. It's not fun, Andy, doing that.
It was enjoyable. Dearie me. Luke, you've got the last question.
Yeah, it's from our friend Marie on Discord.
Marie.
One of our faves. She came all the way from the US to visit us at the Palladium, and she's been into this office to say hey as well.
She has,
because
yes.
everyone who pays for this show is welcome, but not all at the same time. She asks, now that this year's Spotify Wrapped is out, what are your most played songs and artists? Little musical one to finish us off this week.
So I would...
Oasis, some kind of obscure drum and bass / kind of ambient music.
Is this
Fortet, maybe a bit of Fortet in there?
No.
It would be Pitbull, Classic Bon Jovi, Oasis, Libertines in that order.
Do you know what yours is? Have you not looked it up?
I don't consume music that much on Spotify.
He doesn't need to look it up, does he?
No.
I mean, he's rattled those off in an exemplary fashion.
What's yours, Andy?
Well, now 95% of what I listen to now I'm old is hip hop. So it would be Kendrick, Freddie Gibbs, Gunna.
This is boring.
Those would probably be my 3.
It's a boring answer.
Yeah, I could read
Why
mine.
is it a boring answer?
It's music he likes, Marcus.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, we're halfway there.
Oh,
He's back on board. Don't worry now. Mine are. I'll read them right in front of you now.
Come on, let's have a bit of
the five. My top 5 artists are
come
the
on,
Shins,
Lord Banter.
the Shins, the White Stripes, Majesty Crush, the New Pornographers, and the Cave Singers. It's basically the same every year. Sometimes some
Nice to have the White Stripes in there.
Yeah, sometimes the hip hop kind of drops back in there, but not that often.
Which White Stripes song is it? Is it a particular song that would be?
No, it's just the artists. So the most it's artists you've played the most.
Right.
Yeah.
Fancy a little sing song?
Nah, get us out of here.
I'm thinking about my doorbell. When you going to ring it? When you going to ring it?
I'll
give it a minute.
I'm not ringing
thinking
your
about my doorbell.
Marcus, I will not ring your doorbell. How many times I've got to fucking tell you?
I've been watching with one eye on the other side. He's going to cave in a minute. He's going to cave. Thanks for listening to the Football Ramble Mailbag, part of the Acast Creator Network. Remember to get your questions in for next week's episode. Follow us on X, Blue Sky, TikTok and Instagram at Football Ramble. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
All we got inside is
There we go.